Hi, I'm Renee Rivera.
And I'm Hannah Olson, and we're going to talk about the Berlin Wall.
The Berlin Wall was a barrier that divided Berlin from 1961 to 1989. It was constructed by the German Democratic Republic, or GDR, and started on August 13, 1961. The wall completely cut off West Berlin from the surrounding East Germany and from East Berlin until government officials opened it in November 1989. After the end of World War II in Europe, what remained of pre-war Germany West was divided into 4 occupation zones, each one controlled by one of the 4 occupying Allied powers: the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union. The capital of Berlin was similarly subdivided into 4 sectors despite the city's location, which was fully within the Soviet zone.
The Russians began maneuvering to drive the United States, Britain, and France out of the city for good. In 1948, a Soviet blockade of West Berlin aimed to starve the Western Allies out of the city. Instead of retreating, however, the United States and its allies supplied their sectors of the city from the air. After a decade of relative calm, tensions flared again in 1958. For the next 3 years, the Soviets blustered and made threats while the Allies resisted. The Soviets were embarrassed by the seemingly endless flow of nearly 3 million refugees from east to west. In June 1961, some 19,000 people left the German Democratic Republic through Berlin. The following month, 3,000 fled. In the first 11 days of August, 16,000 East Germans crossed the border into West Berlin, and on August 12th, some 2,400 followed, which was the largest number of defectors ever in a single day to leave East Germany in a single day.
That night, the East German government received permission to stop the flow of immigrants by closing its borders for good. In just 2 weeks, the East German Army, police force, and volunteer construction workers had completed a makeshift barbed wire and concrete block wall, the Berlin Wall, that divided one side of the city from the other. Before the wall was built, Berliners on both sides of the city could move around fairly freely. After the wall was built, it became impossible to get from east to west, except through 3 different checkpoints. At each of these checkpoints, East German soldiers screened diplomats and other officials before they were allowed to enter or leave. Only under special circumstances, travelers from East and West Berlin were rarely allowed across the border.
The construction of the Berlin Wall did not stop the flood of refugees from east to west. Over time, East German officials replaced the makeshift wall with one that was sturdier and more difficult to scale. A 12-foot tall, 4-foot wide mass of reinforced concrete that was topped with an enormous pipe that made climbing over nearly impossible. The difference in the government control of West and East Berlin is reflected by the graffiti and lack thereof. On the west, the wall was entirely coated with graphics, reflecting the disdain of the West Berliners at the wall, while the east was bare, which reflected the harsh communist control. At least 171 people were killed trying to get over, under, or around the Berlin Wall.
On November 9, 1989, as the Cold War's tension began to decrease across Eastern Europe, the spokesman for East Berlin's Communist Party announced a change in his city's relations with the West. Starting at midnight that day, he said citizens of the GDR were free to cross the country's borders. East and West Berliners flocked to the wall, drinking beer and champagne exchanging "Open the Gate" in German. At midnight, they flooded through the checkpoints, and more than 2 million people from East Berlin visited West Berlin that weekend to participate in a celebration that was reported to be the greatest street party in the history of the world. This signified the end of